Welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining today's, or rather October's members call. So for those of you who know me, hello, and for those of you who don't, my name is Leanne Kenny. I am the member engagement lead at Nominet. So thank you very much for joining us today. So this is our monthly members call with our chair, Andy Green, and our interim CEO, Ellie Bradley. And we also have some other Nominet staff on the call today who some of you will probably not know. So I thought really good idea to start off with some introductions today, just so that you guys can get to know a couple of new members. Well, actually one of them's not that new, but one of them is. So that'll be self-explanatory in a moment. So first of all, a little word on the format of today's session. So we have quite a lot to cover. We're going to hear from Andy, we're going to hear from David Carroll, who is our Managing Director of Nominet Cyber, and we're going to hear from Ellie Bradley too on social impact. And we've scheduled a couple of hours for that. So there's lots and lots of time for member questions once the presentations have been completed. If you want to ask a question, please just use the raise hand function in the participants box, and I will come to you and ask you to unmute and pop yourself on camera if you're not already, and then you can ask your question then. But probably best to get through the presentations first, because your question might actually get answered by one of the presenters in the interim. So the session is obviously recorded and we make that available in the member hub. And as I said, if you want to ask a question, just use the raise hand function. Can get a little bit busy in the chat, so if you ask the question in the chat, then I may miss it. But I will try and keep an eye on it as well. Okay, so first of all, I am going to pass on to Andy just to introduce himself for any members who have not met Andy already.
Hello, I'm Andy Green. I've been the chair of Nominet since late July.
Thanks, Andy. And then David Carroll. I'm going to take yourself off mute and just introduce yourself to the members.
Certainly. Hello, I'm David. So I'm Managing Director of Nominet Cyber. What that means is really I run the PDNS business. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you, David. And Ellie, I'm going to pass to you next.
Hi, my name is Ellie Bradley. I'm the Managing Director of Registry and Public Benefit and currently interim CEO. And I'm now going to hand over to a new member of the team here at Nominet, so David Buckle. David's joined us recently to head up member engagement activities. So working with Leanne and the team, one of the things we heard very much earlier this year is we needed to do more on member engagement and in different ways. And so we made a commitment to actually bolster that team. And so David has recently joined us. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Ellie. Hello, everybody. I've just joined. This is my first full week. I've been working with members in 4 previous membership organisations, and I'm really delighted to be here at Nominet. I've had the privilege of meeting a couple of you already when we've been doing the interviews and the pre-records for the NED candidacy, he says, and I'm really looking forward to meeting the rest of you in due course. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And then I'm just going to pass to Chris. Some of you may know Chris, but he always likes a chat. So I'm going to let Chris introduce himself too.
I'll keep it brief. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris. I'm the head of social impact.
Okay, with that, I am going to hand over to Andy.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to run through a few things to make sure we're all on the same page. Some of you may be very bored by all this because it's stuff that's out there, and others it will be news to. So first thing is we've got the AGM coming up on November the 18th. Voting will open on the 27th of October. There are 5 ordinary resolutions, the annual report and financial statements, we'll come on to in a minute, reappointment of the auditors, appointment of me as chairman, appointment of Eva, and a reappointment of Stephen Page for 1 year. Stephen's been leading on a lot of the work at the moment. Well, I've been getting my feet under the table, and we'll be replacing him and Rob during the next year. So if members re-elect him, that will help me with the sort of smoothing through the process of moving on from one board to the next. But he's not being appointed for a 3-year term. We go on to the next slide. So we've got the annual report and account out. As always, there's a lot of stuff in it. A big part of it at the front is about the material that I sent out to the members in advance of the annual report and accounts, but then there is a lot of good information about how the company's done over the last year. Obviously, I wasn't there for the financial year, but happy to take questions as we go through on that as well. Now we got that approved by the auditors and out. And then the next one. NED elections, really important. These are the election for the member NEDs, 6 candidates standing, 2 vacancies to fill, both on a 3-year term until the AGM in 2024. Again, voting opens on the 27th of October. And we've got an independent, as ever, scrutineer. They'll send all the details through. What we're going to do is reach out to people and ask them to vote. And we will publish the script we'll be using. You may get a telephone call or an email from Nominet saying, please vote. I think it's really important that as many members as possible vote, both at the AGM and on the NED elections. And the next one really is just to remind everybody, particularly anybody who wasn't on the call, of what we came out with a week or so ago. The key things about public benefit and Nominet, we're committing over the next 3 years to spend £5 million per annum on public benefit activities coming from the operating surplus, and a further up to 50 million from our financial reserves, bring the financial reserves down to around 50 million over the next 3 years. Those numbers can always move around depending on how the markets move because they're invested. Secondly, this point that we're making a strong commitment to running Nominet efficiently and fair pricing and freezing prices until at least 2024. Long debate about whether to reduce or freeze. I think given the current inflation environment and the uncertainty in the economy in general, therefore the impact on volumes, was a prudent decision to freeze the prices. Stating clearly that we're not continuing the strategy of building a portfolio of complementary cyber businesses, and then we've started the process to sell Cyglass. Committing to PDNS, which you're going to hear about a bit more in a minute, but also committing to make that business profitable by during financial year 24. Committing to continue with the small registry services business that we have. And then on remuneration policy, committing to act like a public company and publish a policy statement which says what are the realms within which remuneration can work, and then publishing a clear statement on how that's been implemented each year. There've been a number of people saying, well, why can't we move salaries back up and do other things? Well, the point of that is that's all going to be clear and visible, both in terms of what the policy is we're working to and in terms of what's happened in each time we do it. And we published the first policy document alongside the report and accounts. Is that right? I hope, Ellie? I think that's right. And we've also published a public benefit report, which Ellie will talk about in a minute. And hugely important to me is, member engagement and transparency, giving members the information they need to take their role in governance, giving them rationale for key strategy decisions. If you read the wrong document, I hope you'll see that rationale set out. And we're going to adopt the weights principles of corporate governance. Those are the government approved principles which reflect private companies. They're designed for larger private companies than Nominet, but we don't see anything in them which we think is too onerous for us to implement, and it seems best to pick a clear and well understood benchmark to judge governance against. So that was that. I'm sure there'll be questions about some of those things as we go through. But for now, let's hand over to David to hear about the PDNS service.
Thanks, Andy. So I'll start from the basics, and I'll make an apology. I know there's a lot of folks on the call who know a lot about DNS. So if I'm telling you stuff you know already, bear with me, I have to assume. So DNS is essentially what we use to navigate the internet. And unfortunately, it's also a means for nefarious actors on the internet to prosecute attacks. And so whilst we couldn't survive without DNS, it's also a vulnerability at a macro level. And really that's where protective DNS comes in, because we seek to hinder the distribution of malware and other forms of cyber attack using protected DNS. So really today what I wanted to do was tell you a little bit about the concept, the good work that it does for the UK digital economy, how we use it to safeguard essential public services, and how really it relates to public benefit. So I'll move on quickly and try and canter through this in 10 or 15 minutes, hopefully not too long. Next slide, please, if I may, Leanne. So I'll try and bring it to life by using the scenario of, imagine you're a doctor working in the NHS and you attempt, wittingly or unwittingly, to access a malicious domain. Essentially, protective DNS prevents you from accessing that domain, and we issue a block page. And essentially what that does is it can stop an attack dead in the water. Now, sometimes we don't necessarily know that we're in trouble with cyber attacks. And so it could be that your machine is infected, you don't already know it, and your machine is trying to beacon out to a malicious domain. We'll stop that too. And that kills cyber attacks dead in their tracks. Not all cyber attacks, as I'll explain in a second. But essentially what this is, it's if you like, a very resilient resolver that is attached to a brain of all of the bad domains on the internet that we know are linked to cybercrime. And the way that we do that is we have, by virtue of our position, working with NCSC, we are provided with some privileged access to closed source threat intelligence feeds. We also buy threat intelligence feeds commercially, and we generate our own threat intelligence from the traffic that we receive via PDNS. And essentially we curate those threat intelligence feeds into this, if you like, long list of places that you really shouldn't go on the internet. Now, it's not perfect by any means. It's designed to protect the majority of users from the majority of threats for the majority of the time. And in particular, it's especially good against ransomware attacks, because these are commodity cyber attacks that are not always targeted. They are random in the sense that they look for machine vulnerabilities rather than necessarily targeting individuals, although there is a lot of targeting that goes on as well these days. But it's aligned to this, if you like, maxim that you'll often hear NCSC talking about protecting the majority of people from the majority of threats the majority of the time. And that was what attracted me to PDNS when I was interviewing for my job at Nominet. I couldn't believe I'd never heard of PDNS. And when I was told about it, having been in the cybersecurity industry for 14 years, in terms of its efficacy and power, it was the most interesting cybersecurity proposition that I'd ever heard. Sometimes in our industry, you get a lot of experts for whom such a simple solution isn't that interesting. But what interested me was the efficacy rather than the cleverness of the technology. However, we shouldn't underestimate just how challenging running PDNS is. Whilst the concept in itself of taking DNS traffic and using a large database of known bad domains on the internet and preventing access to those is in itself quite a simple concept. The engineering feat in being able to pull that off and to deliver that within a fraction of a millisecond back to the user, so that the actual solution is unnoticeable to the user, is really significant. And I think it was Nominet's track record in running large DNS infrastructures that made it, and will continue to make it, the natural home for PDNS, in my opinion, because that's our heritage and that's what we do. So I think that's why we were essentially chosen. So if we move on one slide, if we may. So PDNS, we run it on behalf of the National Cybersecurity Centre, and we have done that since 2017. And it's available to all of the UK public sector organisations, including central government and local authorities, and as of last October, to the NHS. And included within that is the vaccine supply chain. We'll expand upon that in a second. But the point is, PDNS is free at the point of use, and it is really the flagship of NCSC's active cyber defence capability. For any of you who aren't familiar with the structure of GCHQ and NCSC and ACD, GCHQ, I'm sure you all know who they are. They have a public-facing agency, if you like, in the form of the National Cybersecurity Centre. They work with industry in order to protect the digital economy. And the Active Cyber Defence Programme is a subset of NCD that aims to provide really proactive services free at the point of use for the public sector, and in some cases for the private sector as well. But we're essentially public sector. And we are very much the kind of poster child, and that's reflected in the fact that we've received, I think, fairly glowing praise from NCSC in the two most recent reports, the Year 3 and the Year 4 NCSC reports, and in the various ACD reports. So we protect more than 900 organisations in the public sector, and then a further 1,200 or so within the health sector. And that really equates to about 6 million people that we are protecting. So it's a big undertaking, and we're very proud of it. I'll bring that to life maybe with a couple of examples now. So if we can roll forward to the first slide, the next slide rather. So I'll tell you about last year. I joined in May of last year, and at this point in time, sorry, April of last year, and at this time, of course, we were in the pandemic, and there were a lot of COVID-related domains that were being used to prosecute cyber attacks. And so the question that we were set by NCSC and that we set ourselves was, what can we do to support the pandemic response? And so it was very quickly decided that we would scope onboarding the NHS to PDNS. So if you can imagine that's a big undertaking, because the NHS, I think, and I could be wrong on this, I could be plucking a meme here, but I think the NHS is the third largest employer in Europe. Either way, it's a very big beast. And so to onboard the NHS to PDNS, we had to be very sure that that would not cause PDNS injury and result in a diminution of protection to the rest of the public sector. So really between April, May and the autumn, we had to do a large amount of testing that involved getting the NHS to cooperate in the first instance, which was a fairly sizable piece of work, bearing in mind that we were locked down at this point. And then we had to do a lot of testing. We had to take sample data and really see what we were getting with the NHS. And by October, we were ready to flick the switch, as it were. And over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, we onboarded not just the NHS, but also some private sector organisations who were active in the vaccine supply chain. So it was a massive undertaking, and it was not without its issues. I probably, given that we're recording this, I'm probably not at liberty to disclose the exact numbers of blocks that we make on behalf of the NHS. but they were very significant, and therefore the engineering considerations were very significant. Safe to say that it went very well, and that the NHS has been very appreciative for Nominet's efforts, and it's a big source of pride that we were able to do something as well as our kind of normal day-to-day work of safeguarding public services. The fact that we were able to protect the NHS from ransomware during the pandemic was a real kind of source of pride. If we roll forward now into December, and I'll take the next slide if I may. For those of you who follow nation-state cyber attacks, and I'll say that you know, PDNS is not designed to prevent nation-state cyber attacks. It's really a tool for the masses. Nonetheless, there was a big furore in December of last year. In fact, it was Sunday, the 13th of December. I remember it very well. And on the evening of Sunday, the 13th, the US government issued what's called an indicator of compromise, or an alert, to say that there was a problem with the ubiquitous SolarWinds technology, which is run by most governments that we would certainly deal with, and that they were the victim of a supply chain cyber attack, where a nation state actor had actually managed to manipulate the code of a software platform that was in use around the world. And for the next, I'd say 2 months, the US government certainly, and other governments, were consumed by the SolarWinds crisis, as some people were calling it. Such was the extent of the attack, the damage that was caused, and a realization that the governments had no idea what their exposure was to SolarWinds. Again, I have to be a little bit careful what I say, but within 24 hours of the SolarWinds indicator of compromise being issued, we were able to provide an accurate picture from the PDNS data of the UK exposure to SolarWinds within 24 hours. That capability hitherto was unheard of, and was a real success, both for our customer and for Nominet, and it's a source of great pride. We couldn't prevent the SolarWinds attack, but we could significantly enhance remediation and allow the government to get its hands around the problem, which nobody else could do at the time. So that was a big tick in the box. So that's just two little case studies of the power of PDNS and how it can be used to protect essential services. How am I doing for time? I think we're okay. Can we roll forward, please? So some of you, the eagle-eyed amongst you, may have spotted that we now do this in Australia as well. So last week, Andrew Hastie, who is the Australian government's Assistant Defence Minister, gave a speech in which he announced AU PDNS. And that is a sister solution to UK PDNS, and that is doing essentially the same task within Australia. And that is something that, again, we're very proud of. We've delivered that without the need for anybody to go to Australia. We work via a partner in the end market, and we've been able to provide the solution to the Australian government and offer them the same level of protection, and then at the same time foster cooperation between NCSC and ACSC. It's a bit of an old cyber cliche that cybersecurity is a team sport, and we never operate in isolation. It takes a bit of a village. So actually, what we're creating now is something that is greater than the sum of the parts in terms of the cybersecurity efficacy, because we now have analysts in Australia who can work with analysts in the UK, and they can essentially, by seeing different things, they can cooperate and provide really vital intelligence to each other and provide better service to the customer. I'll take the next slide, please. So what's the future? Well, we're going to keep on doing what we're doing. We want to expand the footprint of PDNS in the UK. More and more public services need to be protected. Not everybody's on there yet. So we're doing a lot of work with NCSC to market the service and to look at ways in which the service can be expanded beyond its initial footprint. I mentioned that PDNS didn't detect and wasn't expected to detect the SolarWinds attack. And indeed, it would probably never detect an attack of that nature, given that it involved, if you like, the infiltration of a code base of a third party. However, the future of PDNS is to invest in analytics so that the PDNS solution can actually start to look at the data and automatically detect, rather than, if you like, have to be told via third party or privileged threat intelligence feeds where the malicious domains lie. And so we've been doing a lot of work with NCSC, heuristics work, other types of analysis, so that we can divine more threat intelligence from the actual traffic that we see. Now, obviously, you'll know that the focus of the business is to put it onto a profitable footing. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to make the contracts that we've got bigger and more profitable. And at the same time, we will also seek ways to have additional PDNS contracts. So we've set ourselves the goal of being profitable by FY24. Please rest assured, I will be busting a blood vessel to do that earlier. And we've made great progress so far. We think this is a really valuable service. Its natural home is Nominet. And I hope I've conveyed how excited I am by the actual proposition. And I'm really looking forward to its evolution. So I'll wind up now. If I can roll forward to the next slide, please. Apologies, I thought that was, yeah, that's at the end now. But essentially, you'll see at the end, in terms of how we roll into public benefit, you know, we're all about being connected, inclusive, and secure. I'm the secure bit, and I think that we have a lot to offer under the public benefit banner. So I'll stop talking there, and I look forward to taking any questions, which I think we're doing at the end.
Leanne, we can't hear you if you're talking, but shall I pick up now?
Go. Can you hear me now?
We can.
What happened there? I'll plug my headphones back in, but Ellie, if you crack on while I'm sorting that out.
Thanks, Leanne. Thanks very much, David, as well for that. So I just wanted to provide a quick update on social impact. Yesterday, as well as the annual report and accounts, we published our latest social impact report. If we go on to the next slide, please, Ruth. So this is the report that we produce on an annual basis and really looks at grant making during the financial year that ended in 2021. And as part of that social impact report, we look at the reach of the various programs and partnerships and activities that we're involved in. And the way we look at that reach and the impact is by working with an independent third party called Impact in Focus. And they work with all the various organisations that are part of that social impact programme to gather data on the impact of the work that we've funded, so that can all be brought together in the social impact report and made available to all members and our stakeholders. So I want to talk a little bit about our work in 2021 and later I'll talk as well about our pipeline this year and the work we're doing. Obviously, it's been a pretty challenging year for many people, particularly the third sector. And so it's been necessary during the year that we're sort of talking about for some of that work to evolve and change, really responding to an unprecedented situation. And I think that comes through as well in the impact report if you have an opportunity to read it. So if we go on to the next slide, please. Thanks, Ruth. So this is really giving you a sense of the various partners. So we've now got 20 organisations that we're working with through the social impact programmes under those headings of connected, inclusive and secure. And we work in a range of different areas. So that might be about digital access and inclusion. So actually, how do we ensure that young people have access to the devices that they need to grow up in a digital world? It might be then about digital skills and careers, thinking about things like youth unemployment, making sure that we're addressing the digital skills shortage or making a contribution to that, and making sure there's real diversity as well in terms of those people that are gaining digital skills and entering digital careers. We also look into essential digital services. So that's making sure that young people can access the services they need. And finally, there's a focus as well within the social impact work on internet safety. So there we'll be looking at some of the most vulnerable groups. We had a major kickoff of a program earlier this year, working with young people in care, but also that would cover the sort of activities we do with organisations like the Internet Watch Foundation and the National Crime Agency, specifically around young people's exploitation online. And you can see there the various partners that we've worked with, the different projects that have been funded over the course of 2021, and the reach that's been attributed to the funding that was made available to those partners. Some of those programs are still in development, and that may be because they were directly impacted by the pandemic. Or it may be that the work that we funded was not necessarily about having direct impact on young people, but was about creating an environment where impact could be more effective. So some of the work we do around, for example, design patterns is about making sure there's a library of insight and intelligence that helps people who are designing programs to support young people have access to sort of tried and tested methods for doing that. So all of those attributed impacts are those that are reported by the partners that we work with. And as I say, they are then worked through an independent third party called Impact in Focus to bring together that overall number of 1.8 million young people over the course of a year. So go on to the next slide, please. So grant making for FY 2021 was over £3.4 million. And you can see there how that spreads across the different social impact, social issues that the social impact work covers. So over £500,000 into digital access and inclusion, similar amount of money into countering online harm, and then very significant investments around digital skills and internet safety for all. And that figure is what's directly spent on the good causes and on those initiatives. And you can see within the annual report, the overall expenditure, which includes the operating costs of actually running the social impact work is included in the annual report at £3.7 million. And we've seen a real increase in the number of partners that we're working with. So we're now up to 34 different partners that we're working with on different aspects of the social impact programme. And if we move on to the next slide, we can talk a little bit more about the pipeline of activity that we've got coming through this year. So a whole range of programmes, things like Reset 2, so that's building on the work we did, the original Reset programme, which is around young people's mental health. When we develop a programme like Reset, we do that based on initial discovery research, so really trying to understand the issue and understand where funding from Nominet can have an impact. What we don't want to do, for example, is duplicate other initiatives. What we want to try to do is help existing organisations that are working in a particular area either work more effectively or really amplify the work that they're doing. So Reset 2 is again around mental health and young people's mental health online, and that will be something that we're launching later this year. We've got quite a long-standing partnership now with the Samaritans. It wasn't necessarily how we originally envisaged it, but that's worked incredibly well. And we've got 3 new digital services that we're supporting the Samaritans to deliver this year. Firstly, a digital learning hub for practitioners working with young people around self-harm and suicide. Also an email support model that will allow more volunteers to volunteer virtually. And also online peer support. So it's a long-standing partnership now, or several-year partnership with Samaritans, which is continuing to develop and continuing to have real impact. We've also got things like the Data Poverty Lab. Now this is slightly different. This is where we're looking at how do we tackle a huge issue with data poverty in the UK today, and working with other organisations, academics, people in the sector to try to understand how we can really crack this real challenge. You see in other countries some quite innovative approaches actually to data poverty with data gifting and different approaches. And I think what we want to try and understand is how can we tackle this in the UK. So we're one of a number of organisations involved in that thinking. And then at a very sort of kind of practical level, the corporate device recycling programme is about how can local authorities get involved in ensuring that devices are not just added to landfill, but old devices are recycled back into communities, and the millions of people in the UK today who don't have access to an adequate device can benefit. And then we have other programmes where we're building on existing partnerships like Microbit, specifically looking at the Microbit offer into primary schools. We're working with the Prince's Trust on a programme around youth employability, and we're also continuing our work with the Scouts, but this time very much focused on Scout leaders and making sure Scout leaders have the necessary digital skills in order to support the young people that they're working with. I won't go through all of them, but just a couple of others to highlight. You may have noticed in Andy's communications some support for some major programmes, specifically with the UK Safer Internet Centre. They reach millions of young people every year through the Safer Internet Day and their ongoing support that they provide. They're absolutely about making sure young people have a safe experience online. And also a major partnership with the Institute of Coding, and that's about continuing to build on the successes of the Institute of Coding, but really also about widening participation. How can we make sure that underrepresented groups and those that might not naturally have access to coding learning can actually access something like the courses provided through the Institute of Coding, and there'll be much more information about that later in the year. And that's an example, as are others in the programme, where we'd be really interested to understand how we could potentially work more closely with members on these kind of programmes. So I think we probably all have a challenge with digital skills and getting the right people into our organisations, but actually is there other roles that members could take in those kind of programmes as well. And finally, just a quick mention for something that's coming out next month, which is a major piece of research that we've commissioned to look at young people's experiences online. So it's a really hopefully groundbreaking piece of research looking at a whole range of different data points about young people's experience. And the idea with that is that will continue to inform the focus of the programmes that we develop at Nominet, but also others in the sector. So that will be about really kind of adding to the information that's available and really understanding young people's experience from their perspective. Next slide, please, Ruth. Okay, so finally, just wanted to give a quick shout out, and maybe Leanne, you want to come in on this as well, to members GiveHub. So this is something that's been in place now for a few months. I know you're helping with this on a day-to-day basis, Leanne, so shall I hand over to you?
Yep, absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, just checking that the headphones are actually working. Yes, so members GiveHub. We've set up members GiveHub actually in response to members wanting to feel more connected to the public benefit activity that we do. We know that we have 2,400 members, and lots of members are connected to charities and have charities that are close to their hearts. So it's currently in the pilot stage. We do have one of our panel members actually on this call, Q. So I'm going to give a shout out to the panel, who are a panel of 5 volunteers. They are incredibly dedicated and they have extremely high levels of integrity in assessing the applications. So we launched so a big thank you to them actually, because it is a volunteer and they do take it really, really seriously. And it's a real pleasure to work with them. So this launched in August. We made a successful grant to a organisation called the Derry Regeneration Group, who were in a kind of a deprived area of South Wales, and they wanted to completely refurbish their computer suite. It gives access to homeschooling in the sort of pandemic, obviously to young people, and they also had a whole kind of Silver Surfers group, and they received a grant of the full £10,000. There's up to £50,000 a month available for these grants. So if you have a charity that you're really close to and you feel like they could benefit, really the criteria, which is all published in the member hub, is that it needs to meet one of the 3 pillars, basically connected, inclusive and secure. A lot of the applications that we've had so far have been around providing devices or increasing connectivity, or it might be to, like I said, like the Derry Regeneration Centre, obviously they were just completely refurbishing their whole computer suite because it was 20 years old. So the application window for this runs from the 1st of the month to midnight to the 21st. So if you're super quick, you might be able to get an application in today. And then the panel assess it, and the turnaround for payment is super quick. Basically, the criteria, it needs to be a UK registered charity, and as I said, it is in the pilot stage right now. So if you do have a look at it, and you think, oh, I wonder why that works that way, or I wonder why they don't consider that, then give us that feedback, because at the end of the 6 months we can review that. And obviously make changes. We've already had some really great suggestions from the panel on things that we might need to include in the application form, and actually things that it would be really helpful for applicants to provide. And we are going to plan to do a webinar with the panel at some point in the next couple of months, so they could hopefully give you some top tips on how to make a successful application. So yeah, that's basically GiveHub kind of in a nutshell, really. Super easy to apply, and hopefully helpful for members in terms of feeling a bit more connected to that public benefit activity. So if anybody's got any questions about GiveHub in the Q&A session, happy to take them.
Thanks, Leanne. And I think there's just one more slide, which was the one that gives a bit more context to how how all the various bits of that public benefit work fit together. So obviously Nominet as a public benefit company, key point about operating in the public interest, but bringing together the work we do, the UK registry as an operator of critical national infrastructure, and as David has outlined, that work protecting public services. And then specific sort of direct activity around GiveHub, how we support the digital economy more broadly, how we're going to continue to grow our role contributing to the internet community and really playing our part there, and that measurable social impact work, the work we report on through the report that came out yesterday, and that's all within our 1 Million Lives programme.
Great. Okay, questions. So I know that Ashley, you had some questions on PDNS, so I hope other members don't mind, because Ashley is tight. She only has a finite amount of time to actually ask the questions. So I know you've got a number of questions, Ashley. Should we get yours, go to you first, and then if anybody else has any questions, please use the raise hand function in the participants bit, and we will come to you. So Ashley, if you kick off, and then if somebody else puts their hand up, I know I have your questions in the chat, so I can ask the rest of them if you need to leave. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to jump off in 10 minutes, so I appreciate the chance to ask these. So I think, especially now we look at all of the legislation coming through in Europe, and the increased public scrutiny on how domains are used for malicious purposes. So I'd love to see creative approaches to solving that. That said, I'm a little bit nervous about a couple functions of the PDNS, and I'd like to have just a little bit more information on it. So the first thing that I think would be important to understand is what's the false positive rate on the service, because if you're limiting access to public services, it needs to be almost nothing.
Yep. Yeah, really good shout. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of PDNS, is that we've been able to do it with such a low false positive rate. Obviously, there are trade-offs involved. but I think, you know, in the typical working month, we'll maybe have 3 or 4 false positives, which NCSC tell us is pretty good, and you know, we're quite happy with. So, but you're absolutely right, Ashley. If the false positive rate was high, people just wouldn't use the service, and that's especially important now in the NHS, where we have, you know, machines that need to call out to the correct domains, and they're vital for operations. So yeah, it's a big issue.
Yeah. Are there like mechanisms in place for people to address that, or do they just not even know that their access has been blocked? Like,
no, we absolutely, we issue a block page.
Mhm.
And so the user will immediately know, assuming the user is a human being, of course.
Yeah.
The block page will be issued. But what we also give is we have a range of portals, and unfortunately, the NCSC doesn't let me show those to just everybody, which is a bit of a shame, because I would have loved to have done that. So the end user gets a portal view of everything that's been blocked, where it is, and that significantly, you know, kind of assists any kind of false positives and remediation, and that portal view is also provided up to the authority, to NCSC, so that they can aid national response to crises.
That's helpful. With the trusted reporters that are used by the PDNS, is that like a transparent list that's published? Because I know that a lot of times when registries and registrars are involved in any of this business, the trusted providers often come under scrutiny, just to make sure that, you know, we're clear about who we're taking information from. So is that information available publicly?
It's not currently, and I don't think it would ever necessarily be made public. But we wouldn't rule out sharing. Again, I've got to be careful what I say, because these are not my decisions. But we do have regular conversations with NCSC about the possibilities around sharing with ISPs, etc., to enhance the nation's security as a whole.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful as well. Like, I understand the security concerns with publishing a list like that, but I think anytime you're limiting access for services over the DNS, then in transparency and balancing access and remediation is really important. That leads me to my last question. So I look at countries where the government plays a really active role in limiting traffic over the DNS, especially for whatever political causes they might have. I look back at Egypt and Morocco. I look at what's ongoing in China and Russia. And so anytime the government gets more involved in DNS traffic, I get concerned. And so I was just curious, what role does the government play in deciding which traffic is blocked over this service? And are there checks and balances in place? And is that limited to access to government services, or is it also applied to private services?
Yeah, I mean, sensitive topic, but first off, this is for the public sector. So it's not for the citizen. Again, I'll choose my words very carefully. NCSC have avoided taking this to the citizen. Other countries have. So there are initiatives like Canadian Shield. But again, they are, you know, as soon as you start to stray into that territory, it gets very contentious very quickly. And certainly those initiatives haven't been particularly well taken up in those countries. But in terms of, you know, the government's, if you like, saying what gets blocked and what doesn't, they kind of rely on us to take a variety of feeds that are available to most enterprise organizations, with the exception of 1 or 2. So there's not so much, you know, this isn't content filtering, and we're not actively seeking to channel what people can access. We are just trying to keep them away from malicious domains, and yeah, the kind of the governance around that is it is challenging, but not insurmountable.
Yeah, like I know this is not like an issue that's specific to the UK in any way, but I think the more transparency there can be around what checks and balances there are in the service, and what role the government plays, and what, like how that access would be governed at any point if they were to interfere. I think that's just important in protecting the open, free access of the internet, and just really setting a clear differentiation between the UK and their internet and the values that represents, and then how other countries and governments might use to manage the DNS. So thank you. That helps. More information is always appreciated.
Thanks, Ashley. And how efficient. We did it within the time that you had left available. Okay, so I am looking for questions from members. Don't be shy. We've covered a lot in this session today. Reporting accounts, board commitments, PDNS, social impact. So if you have any questions, now is the time to ask them. Just raise your hand and we will come to you there. And as if by magic, my encouragement has had somebody raise their hand. Simon, I'll come to you if you want to take yourself off mute and ask your question.
Hi, thanks very much, Nan. First of all, thanks very much to everyone for their presentations. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I think, David, it seems to me that it should be very sort of possible to analyze the sort of DNS traffic that flows normally through public sector, and then bucket it and figure out when stuff starts looking abnormal. You know, in hindsight, it should have been totally possible to detect the SolarWinds activity if its attack vector used DNS. And so I think there's a definite area for improving the heuristics and analysis there to say, oh, this is weird. Traffic that we used to see, you know, going from A to B is now going to C, and there's really no explanation for that that's legitimate. And that could be a pretty interesting evolution. That work's underway.
It is, yes, absolutely, and is consuming a lot of our brightest and best. Yeah, absolutely.
I have a suggestion to talk to you maybe offline about that, but yeah, I think that's a definite AI use case waiting to be explored, which would be interesting. And I think Ashley's points are valid about making sure that it's not, you know, a means to sort of stifle content or access, which kind of has a similar overlapping bit with sort of domain names that are being used badly, being squashed. You know, oh, this is a malicious domain name, we're going to take it offline because it contained the word COVID, right? There's an interesting sort of censorship angle there that I think you're obviously aware to manage. Yeah, that was my main sort of technical question. It sounds like an interesting field. Other plans to grow PDNS's client base? And obviously at the moment you've got the Australian and the British markets, but you're interested in expanding it to other countries?
We are. We have to tread very carefully there because we have to take a lot of counsel from NCSC. But there are other nations that have expressed an interest in PDNS. That is a complicated process, but not, you know, it's one that we are actively engaged in. So yes, absolutely. I mean, you know, the quickest route to profitability for this business is to add more value and to you know, if you like, get our existing customers to pay more for PDNS as we layer value and value. Right. Your example,
upsell.
for example.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
But there are other governments interested, and we're very kind of cognizant of the sensitivities around that and how we mustn't do anything to jeopardize Nominet's core values or to do anything that would not be, should we say, to public benefit.
Brilliant, thanks very much. I guess a question for you then, Andy, is will PDNS's activities could be classed as public benefit, but presumably they're being exempted, their cost is being exempted from your contributions towards public benefit, is the first question.
That's
and
right.
Then the second,
the PDNS business as it currently exists is not counted towards anything towards public benefit. It's taken into the operational results of the organisation from which the surplus is counted.
Excellent. So it's exempt from that contribution. And then I guess the counterpoint would be in 3 years' time, or hopefully less, when PDNS is generating surplus profits, will those profits go back towards public benefit?
Well, the commitment, we haven't looked at, there are people who have said one answer to the way we think about the business is to have subsidiaries and those sorts of things. We haven't gone down that route at all. So yes, indeed, at the moment, and we have no other plan than to continue to consolidate PDNS into our numbers, and you'll see that in the report of the council and in the 6-month report that comes out, and that's the plan. Now, we're going to move on later to the governance questions that we all need to think about. There are lots of ways you can think about things, but right now, no plans to do anything other than that. There's no trick here. The reason we said we wanted to contribute is it should result in keeping the cost of the core down.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Okay, any more questions for Andy, David, Ellie, me, other David? Put David Buckle on the spot. We're being very efficient. We had 2 hours for this call, but you're only using an hour. Nope. Okay, I'm not gonna keep you for any longer than is necessary. So if there are no further questions, you are released from this month's member call. But I will do a shameless plug. Oh, Andy, do you have your hand raised?
I just wanted to ask everybody, please. One of the big things I feel about a member organisation is that members should vote, and I think there are a lot of people out there who are worried about voting, who or too apathetic to vote. Anything you can do as members to help us as well, I'd really appreciate it. It just is important for any vibrant organisation to have a membership organisation that's voting.
Okay, thank you. And that statement seems to have prompted a couple of people to raise their hand once again. Cyprian, I'm going to come to you first. Do you want to take yourself off mute?
Yeah, hello, Andy. In regards to the vote, I've made a formal complaint in regards to the election last week. I didn't have a response for over 7 days. I just feel like it's rather badly handled.
I understand you. Cyprian is complaining because we published the list of candidates alphabetically by their first name rather than their last name, having previously done it by their last name. Personally, I can see no evidence that this is anything at all other than just a decision by somebody. We'll look into it. I only got it.
But there is a pattern of 20 years of being published alphabetically by surname, and then all of a sudden
I understand that it appears very important to you, but I really doubt with 6 candidates it's a major issue. Definitely,
yeah, okay. But
hear what the candidates think about it. Of course, I do apologise if it's upset you, but I don't think there's any malice included in it, and we will get back to you as soon as we can on the subject.
But surely the company secretary could have acknowledged my complaint at least. I had no response for 7 days.
A holiday period with the company secretary, for which I apologise, and we will ensure that we don't have that sort of glitch in the future.
Okay, because yeah, I've detailed the pattern of such behaviour that is going on in that department of the company. Okay, thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Simon, should we come to you?
Hiya, thanks. Yeah, just I was going to say that I'll do everything I can to engage members to vote, and I already have done, and I'll send an email around, and I will try and get members to vote. I appreciate your commitment to publishing the transcript that will be used to encourage members to vote. I think that's important in light of the recent EGM action. What I was going to say before Cyprian talked was actually that I think those are important steps because there is this process of trying to rebuild trust. The sequencing of the candidate candidate names is an oddity. It seems peculiar that under normal circumstances I would have been at the top of that list, and honestly I don't care, but it does just seem like there's the possibility of some shenanigans. Like, why change the format if there is no explanation for it? And I can understand where someone's coming from and other members, that it looks like it looks just like a silliness that could have been avoided. It's a peculiarity, and notwithstanding that,
I only became aware of it this morning, so I don't know what.
Andy, I don't think that you've had anything to do with it.
People, so I doubt it's going to make much difference. But I know it
does. Quite.
It really does make a difference. But I mean, I agree with you that we'll need to look at it and find out what happened. But I don't know at the moment.
Clearly, in the pantheon of things that can go wrong, it's not a big problem, but it's just potentially a completely avoidable marker that can be misconstrued. So it's unfortunate, I guess. It's unfortunate, and it's something that I doubt that you've been involved in, but would be good to look into. I doubt there's going to be an answer to it, but I guess the fact is it just looks more silly buggers.
Unfortunately, we are still at the stage where everything that is cock up is conspiracy, and that. That's really very important. Creating trust is vital.
Yeah, it's a shame. And yes, Simon's point's valid that an acknowledgement within a reasonable time frame would be fair. Otherwise, it seems to confirm a pattern that I know that you're going to great lengths to change. So a missed opportunity potentially, but no point labouring the point. I'll do what I can to get more members engaged and voting, however they want to.
Exactly. However we are aligned on that point. Good. So other than that, just thank you again always for your time. It's really appreciated. A lot of interesting stuff going on at Nominet. I hope over time we'll all get to be really proud of some of the stuff that goes on. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. I'm just going to do a shameless plug for the listening process webinar on Monday. So please do register for that. I know it's some people may be off on half term, but if you are available, we would like to see you there on Monday afternoon. So yes, that's all from me. Always like to get a little plug in for a member engagement event at the end there. And also please do take a look at GiveHub too. Okay, thanks ever so much to all of our presenters today, and thank you for all of you for joining us. Hope to see you on Monday, and have a great weekend. Bye for now.